Excited to be back here. It's been a long time since I've had to pull together a lecture, so this will be a fun little experiment, see if I've still got it. So this is downtown Turners Falls. Some of the things I've been doing, one is doing some project photography for Berkshire Design Group and a couple of other offices. I'll tell you about another project shortly, but this is the photo as I took it. I had kicked the leaves out from kind of the central space and knocked it around the back of the wall, not realizing that really looking at the back of the wall was the best shot for showing this space, and I didn't have a broom with me. So it was really important then to just go into Photoshop and do a little washing of the pavement and removing the leaves and getting this into a more presentable form. So I've had an opportunity, and one of the things in terms of photography is just being able to go through and apply some of the things that I used to teach. So just to get a sense of the people who are here, how many people use your phone as your primary camera? Okay, how many people have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera? Okay, fewer. How many people have used a polarizing or a neutral density filter? Okay, a couple. How many shoot in RAW format? Or know what that means? And how many people use either Camera Raw, Lightroom, Lumion, any of the applications for processing? Okay. And then how many understand the relationship between aperture, shutter speed, and ISO? Okay. So I'm not going to go into all of that. It was in the first draft, but that got dumped. But I'll explain some of the things as we go along to show how some of these elements fit into the process of photography. So I want to talk about kind of design, part of it in terms of going out to do a photo session of a project, what are all the steps that you would go through to look at a site. And I'll do my best to kind of link that back into design and some of the things that you're doing here. And then talk about really kind of some of the nature photography, the wildlife things that Jack so eloquently spoke about, and then just a brief bit at the end in terms of thinking about the future of photography and some of the things that you have to look forward to. So preparation, essentially it's site analysis. So the things you're familiar with looking at a raw site, and so what I will do is review the plans once the designer has already completed the project, and then talk to them about their design intent to just understand what it is that they were trying to achieve and where I should take photos to document that design intent. So some of the apps, and you should be familiar with some of these. One is the photographer's ephemeris, which is shown up top, which is really for showing you, when does the sun rise, when does it set, when does the moon come up, and gives you specific times, angles. It's a really phenomenal program. So I'll show it on the bigger slide in just a moment. PhotoPills is a very similar app that you can get on your phone or iPad or computer. Google Earth Pro, which I assume all of you are very intimately familiar with, is an incredibly useful tool for just scoping out a site and its surroundings. And then weather.com, Clear Outside, which gives you detailed information on clouds. So, before you go out and shoot, you need to know if it's going to be raining or not. So check the weather. The Clear Outside gives you what the density of clouds is going to be at low clouds, medium clouds, high clouds, so that you get a sense of, are you going to be able to get some nice background for your photographs. Google Earth Pro for just beginning to set up your photo shoot and just looking at the surroundings, and are there hills, or in this case, kind of looking at the notch, some nice things that you can use as the background element for a photograph. And then this is the photographer's ephemeris, which you can see the dark yellow line represents the sun coming. The standing point is that little red push pin, And then the orange line is the direction where the sun is going to set. The blue lines are the moon. And so you can start to get a sense of your environment. But if you're going to a site, and especially you as a designer, if you're looking at a place and you're trying to understand the movement of the sun throughout the course of the day, you can pick any day of the year or several days and just look at where the sun's going to be shining. If you're going to try and align various elements or cast shadows over some particular feature in your design, you can do that very easily using this application. So this one example I want to show, this was kind of an image that I have in my mind. I live close to the Quabbin Reservoir, and if we walk down the end of the street, we can stand, look over the reservoir, and can see the Quabbin Tower. And so I wanted to try and find a time when the moon would be coming up and coming behind the tower. And so it's not one of those things that happens every month. It's like every year and a half. So it's, you get one shot. First time I tried it, all clouds, so couldn't do it. But finally was able to get out there. And this gives you a general sense of where to be standing. I had been able to calculate that it was somewhere around 5 degrees was going to be the point when the moon was up from behind the back of the hill and would be behind the tower. But again, the moon doesn't just come straight up. It angles across. So there was a bit of sprinting with a big 500 millimeter lens going down along the edge of the Quabbin, trying to get the right spot as the moon began to rise. But this one time was able to nail it. So this was a couple of years ago, and this year in September, I noticed that the moon was going to rise again, decided I would give it another shot, just with using what are called extension tubes, go for a bigger focal length. And I was blown away, because that particular night, there were forest fires out west, and the smoke had blown this way, so the light was diffracted through the atmosphere and got this brilliant orange moon that was just insane. So one of the things is just thinking in terms of composition. How many people are familiar with the rule of thirds, that Kodak moment? So, just a basic starting point for photographers to just try and get something in your photograph that, is at those cross axes of the thirds of the photograph. So in this case, the kids are in these two bottom thirds, and then the bucket up in the middle, pouring the water down. But thinking about that, another idea is just in terms of thinking about symmetry. You want to have something that's relatively simple and legible, and then using leading lines to draw people's attention into a scene. In this case, I'm thinking really the leading lines are up and then the water down. And then just awareness of the background. You don't want fussy things happening in the back of the photo that are going to distract. So this is an example. I had a project in the city of Worcester working for a landscape architecture firm for their open space report. And so I needed, over 9 months, take photos of 24 different parks in 4 different seasons. So it was a lot of trips out to Worcester and finding these parks and taking photos. This happens to be Elm Park, Olmsted project. The Olmsted brothers did the path layout. So this is just one of those pathways. So leading line is the S-curve going through the central portion. Obviously, the focal point is the person sitting there. And one thing with photography, we're people, so our attention is usually focused on whatever person happens to be in the scene. So in this case, kind of having the dark shadow serve as the base for the bottom of the photograph, the person silhouetted against the lighter lawn, and keeping the tree on the edge so that your eye goes through the image and then hits the tree and returns. And then symmetry, something or an object where you've got symmetry, it's good to just align that up and embrace the symmetry that you see. This the bridge in Elm Park going over the water body. And this, actually, Ethan, another Olmsted project. This is the Biltmore Estate. But this is a Chihuly sculpture that was a temporary exhibit in one of the fountain areas, but just where you've got horizontal and vertical symmetry. And just love the colors. So this was a long exposure, 6 seconds, obviously requiring a tripod. So for photographers, the most important ingredient is light. So golden hour, kind of that hour before sunrise, or after sunrise, or the hour before sunset, where you've got a really nice golden color in the landscape and things are lit up. Really trying to shoot either at or towards the sun or from about 90 degrees so that you can get shadows cast through the area. Just recognizing this is where the photographer's ephemeris comes in, is just, the sun is changing position every day. So it's needing to really understand exactly where it's going to be coming from and casting those shadows. And then kind of best time of day to be shooting. I mean, yes, the golden hour if you can, but if you're doing landscape architecture photography, in my own mind, it's really about the people using the places that you're photographing. So you want to be there when there are people actually using the space. Doesn't matter if the lighting is absolutely perfect. It's great when those things align. So this is a Berkshire design project, really just this ramp going down to the boathouse at Smith College. So looking over Paradise Pond. And this is the golden hour. So you get this nice warm glow, and you can clearly see then the ramp making its way down, and really some wonderful planting within the ramp that lets it kind of blend into that hillside. So this woman and her daughter, I spoke to them just to make sure they were okay with me taking photographs. They were fine, just kept chatting away. And yeah, you can begin to see how the plant material begin to really embrace that. And this is a relatively new project, so it's only going to improve over time or fill in. So it was wonderful to be able to have some people there using the space and in the photo. And this is kind of a designer's dream, children, balloons. Doesn't get any better than that. So, having a kid playing with a balloon down in the space kind of helps draw your attention right into the photograph. And they were not paid. And then this is, again, for Worcester, this is their City Hall Park. And right after I signed the contract for this, COVID hit, and all of the playgrounds were shut down, and a lot of the park activities ceased to take place. So it was a challenge going around and trying to find people actually using some of the spaces. So like this, I went there at lunchtime thinking I would find people dining and eating out in this space at noon, and all the chairs were chained to the tables and nothing happening. And then eventually they just removed all the tables. But I did get there one evening, and there was kind of a social network meetup thing where people came out and roller skated at night. So I was able to go out and take photos of that, and also got photos just before COVID hit, when they have this oval set up as a skating rink. And it's really a wonderful environment and lots of people using this space. So as landscape architects, as I was taking photos, one of the things to understand, especially with vegetation and trees, is that trees are naked half of the year. So there's a whole different quality in terms of light, views, what you're seeing. So think about that as you're going through and doing your own planting designs and laying out the framework for your design, that it's not going to be a stagnant element. This is going to change both during the course of the year as well as over time as trees and vegetation grows. Then just the character of light in the early spring. where you get this very dappled light and the shadows on the ground. And so there's really a balance in terms of shade and light compared to when you get into the summertime and the trees are mature now and you've got, or the leaves have all come out and you've got very dark shade. So again, a very different kind of atmosphere that you have within the same space. Another thing to really be thinking about is just scale. So I mean, look at this waterfall. How high are you imagining that a person would be in this particular scene? So I was able to use my lovely wife Polly as model. So is this what you were imagining? So really, until you get a person into a scene, that's really our own, as people, that's our unique way of measuring and understanding scale and how really we perceive an environment. So this was a long exposure. I have a very patient wife. So just want to go through in terms of parks and really the range of activities that, you know, as you're doing park designs on your own, really thinking about programming the kinds of activities that are going to be taking place. But, you know, so what do you envision people doing? But then also, what are the physical facilities that are required in order to accommodate that activity? And it's pretty amazing how many things take place in the park that require absolutely no infrastructure. And really the things that do require a lot of infrastructure, a lot of times tend to be the things that are the least used. So, you know, there's this trade-off in terms of expense and what kinds of, who's the public that you're trying to serve. So obviously, people just meeting up on the pathway and having a chit-chat requires nothing other than a path. You know, if you've got nature trails, you know, just opportunities for people to nature watch, you know, point out bird sightings, or go with their child to go look for wildlife, and encourage you to really incorporate, you know, interpretive signage that helps people understand what it is that they're seeing or what the nature of the environment is that they're moving through. And that can be historical interpretation. This particular walkway was along the Blackstone River, so there's a lot of historical interpretation there as well. So this is my Joe Volpe reference, that his big thing was really the idea of taking a walk for a walk's sake. And so that's, you know, these women just kind of power walking around the pond, kind of jogging and walking through the landscape. This is Institute Park in Worcester. Again, this was during COVID and there weren't a whole lot of people out. So this was actually an image that was composite of 5 separate photographs, where I set up on a tripod and took the first shot and then waited for somebody to come along in a different place and took another photo, and then composited and then just used layer masks to kind of erase parts and reveal the people behind. So the nice thing is that don't need to, you know, the person was really there. They were at that spot. They just weren't really all there at the same time. So then other things in terms of depending upon the resources that are available in a place, just, you know, constituents to be thinking about. There's fishermen that require very little, just access to the water or the pond. Kayaking. It's nice the Swan cooperated. And then children, I mean, water is a child magnet. So kids going down to play around in the water, look for little creatures. And then if you have an opportunity for, you know, if there's an opportunity for putting in a beach with access for swimming. Parks are hangout for people doing fitness. I mean, these ladies working out, talked to them before I took their picture. But you know, definitely into it, just bringing all their equipment out there and setting up and performing for everybody walking by. And then just kids playing card games. Again, so many informal activities that take place in parks. Men in the neighborhood just sitting at the tables, gabbing about whatever happens to be going on, as well as playing card games. Fathers and sons having catch. Rip Van Winkle. I was just really intrigued by this guy seemingly growing out of the tree root. And then people doing their remote working or video game. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing. And then parents and their kids just enjoying spring. And then farmers markets. I mean, again, things that don't require a lot of physical infrastructure. But then parks are also places for memorials. This is the state's Vietnam Memorial in Worcester. So there are actually three. You saw the first one, the flag waving with the arbor was kind of the first part, and then there's this one with letters from home, and then the memorial with the names on the far side of the pond. In some communities, they have municipal golf courses. This guy hit a hell of a drive. And then related to golf is disc golf. So again, this is something that requires a lot less infrastructure than a normal golf course and is really gaining in popularity. The guy on the right is the founder of the Disc Golf League in Worcester. And then there are, again, things that require a fair bit of infrastructure but really aren't used all that much. In Worcester, they happen to have a ball hockey league, and so people get out there and play. This just happened to be there when they were having tryouts, so I was able to actually go out and get some shots of them playing. Places for bikes and skateboarders. Unfortunately, this guy didn't nail his landing. And then handball, or in this case, guys adapting it to racquetball. I don't know if you've ever played handball, but man, that hurts your hand. So these guys are smart. And then tennis, which my favorite sport, but unfortunately going into a bit of a decline, partly because of this sport. Pickleball, which has gained in popularity. We were just down in Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving and went to a park to go play some pickleball, and they had 3 tennis courts and 8 pickleball courts. Pickleball courts were packed with people waiting to get on. Tennis courts were empty. So, a sad commentary. And of course, basketball, baseball. I just like the way everybody's looking at the ball. Unfortunately, this was a very long foul ball. I was hoping it would be a home run. And then softball. And again, really well-maintained parks here in Worcester. And then I really like this sequence, that kind of the pitcher pitching and the batter hitting and the pitcher making a great snag. So other elements that are really popular now, this is the opening day at Amherst's dog park. I don't know how many people have heard of dog parks. It's something that's really up and coming. Berkshire has gotten a bit of the market on these in terms of designing dog parks. And this was the guy that drew the winning ticket to be the first one to come into the dog park. So I'm not sure who's happier, him or the dog. But just some of the dogs that were out there waiting to get into this wonderful park. So they have specialized, in terms of facilities, they have specialized doggy water fountains. So the owner has to go and press the button, but it fills up the bowl in the bottom, and then it just slowly drains out so that there isn't sitting water. And so this is the area for large dogs over 30 pounds. And then this is actually from the South Hadley Dog Park, but this is their small dog area, so they don't get beat up on. And this is also a Berkshire project in Amherst. This is Groff Park. So again, the notion that you can take kind of standard playground elements, but compose them in a really wonderful way and put them into a really nicely composed setting is something that's really important. As well as providing refuge for parents that are at the park, watching their kids play in the playground or in the water park. And again, this is the whole thing in terms of time of day. You don't want to be coming here at golden hour expecting to find people frolicking in the spray fountain. It's kind of mid-late afternoon is when you're going to find people actually relishing in this activity. And playgrounds. So weaving elements into creating landform to shape the spaces as well as just informal play. And then moving into winter, again, just thinking about opportunities for cross-country skiing, the ice skating, and always something I try to think about in the back of my mind is just storytelling. I mean, if you look at the photo and it's a father talking to his daughter, but then you look at her knees and you can see that she's just fallen. Then you look at her skates and you can see that she's not really an experienced ice skater, that this is probably her first time out on the ice, and the father's trying to encourage her to come along. So just thinking about, they're getting you thinking about what's actually happening in the scene that you're observing. And then looking at slopes, one thing to always think about in terms of parks is that, yes, steep slopes are bad for a tennis court or a baseball field, but they also provide a wonderful opportunity. So sledding hills, couldn't have them without a good steep landform. So again, when you're creating your opportunities and constraints maps, just always think that every constraint that you outline is also an opportunity for something else. So look at both sides of everything that you analyze. And then just details, thinking about in terms of design. This is that Avenue A in Turner's Falls again. So thinking about the paving patterns that are used to help define a space, looking at seating and lighting, landscape lighting, pedestrian lighting, the underwall lighting, and then not just other details, these little artist-created medallions to kind of try and discourage snowboarders from grinding the edges of the benches. So just lots of different ways of incorporating things. And then obviously the planting or how you deal with those other areas. So quickly, kind of more some eye candy, but just thinking in terms of really some of the nature photography. And I guess my particular kind of mantra is, just trying to capture common things doing uncommon things. So looking at, haven't seen this since in terms of 3 bluebirds all in the same tree, kind of hanging out, waiting out the snowstorm. But finding some humor, emotion, or as Henri Cartier-Bresson would say, waiting for that decisive moment and finding when you take the photograph. So like this northern water snake, just as it pops its head out of the water and catching as it flicks its tongue and touches the surface of the water and sends out the little ripples. And the cardinal flying through a snowstorm. I think this was what you were referring to. And bald eagle coming down into the Quabbin. And this is one where I had my zoom lens all the way out. I saw this eagle come out of the tree and start flying towards our boat and taking pictures, and then realize it's getting closer and closer and closer. And then it just kind of dove down, and I didn't have time to zoom out to get the whole bird, but I'm actually glad that I wasn't able to, because was able to really get in. This is full frame with a 400 mm lens, so I could blow this sucker pretty big. And just to let you know, yes, it did catch the fish. And one of my favorite photos, this was at sunrise, this great egret flying out over the salt marsh in New Jersey. But with the light coming through the bird and being able to see the silhouette of the bird shining through the wings. And Hung Bing liked it too. She actually made a wonderful watercolor of this image for me, which I have hanging over my desk. And then woodpeckers. Friends of ours said they had a woodpecker in their backyard, and I went looking for it, and I heard all this pecking, but I didn't see any woodpecker. And then all of a sudden I saw this puff of sawdust come popping out of a hole. And so I stuck around and waited and got him as he was cleaning out his nest, hoping to attract a mate. So this is a male pileated woodpecker. The male, the red comes all the way down to the beak, compared to the female, where it only goes kind of halfway, but just as it's catching a grub to feed its little ones and coming home to feed the little ones. They do share, so this is actually the male that's come back to feed the little ones. And there's a male and a female chick in this image. And just the female testing out her tongue, I guess. And then just to kind of illustrate really the magic of light, this hummingbird, this is a ruby-throated hummingbird. You can see just kind of this dull kind of brownish underneath its head or on its chin, and starts to get a little shine, but then all it has to do is turn just a little bit and that ruby, the iridescence really pops out. It's really quite magical. And this is one I had in my head for a long time, trying to capture these two battling hummingbirds fighting over the cardinal flower. And this is just the kind of the moment that a loon popped up from fishing underwater and surfaced and really just loved almost crystalline effect of the water popping up around its head. And a successful fishing venture. It's actually just flipping it up in the air to then catch it and go feed its chick. And this summer was the first time I've ever seen a loon flying. I know they fly, but I've never seen it before. So this was one actually, I mean, incredible timing. It was just kind of flying in for a landing right at sunset, so the sun right in its face. And the thing is, they aren't exactly elegant birds. It just kind of lands with a splat, belly first, and then just glides into a stop. And this was in Zion National Park. This is a California condor. It was flying down to feed its chick. But this was one I was perplexed for a while because I was watching the condor, and then I started taking photos, and I found out when I started looking at some of my pictures that I was actually photographing the shadow, not the actual condor. It was up there, and this shadow was here. But I just waited until it finally circled down and kind of aligned so that I was able to get both the shadow and the condor in the same frame. And this is one of those things where I truly believe you can telepathically communicate with animals sometimes. It's just watching spoonbills, and I worked to kind of position myself so this one was between the others. The two in the back, I saw them just kind of randomly flapping their wings and just kind of saying, come on guys, get it together here. Just give me one. So fortunately, there was one swoop when both put their wings up at the same time, and immediately the one on the left was actually getting ready to take off, and he took off right after this picture. And we've been raising monarch butterflies the past number of years, and so I think our record is 42. But this is just kind of the moment when they hatch, and it's really kind of a funky sight because you can see the abdomen really completely blown out with fluid inside, but it has these little stubby wings. And so what happens for the next hour is it's pumping this fluid into the wings. You can see on the side of the wing there, the veins, and fluid goes in there and they stiffens out the wings until they get out to their full size. And nothing cuter than a baby bear. So one thing, just if you ever do get into doing kind of zoom photography, is just understanding the relationship between shutter speed and focal length. If you're shooting with a big lens like 500 millimeters, the bare minimum typically is you want to be shooting at 1/500th of a second in order to get a relatively clear photo. Even with image stabilized lenses and in-body stabilization for cameras now, you need to keep this really still. If you're going to be shooting slower, like this one, I think this was at 1/125th, but this was on a tripod, so it was able to hold the camera quite steady. So just mother and cub, and then baby following mom, balancing on the log. And so this one was actually on the cover of the Kestrel Land Trust's spring issue this year. So I have allowed a number of nonprofits to use photographs. So the Friends of Quabbin, they've got a bunch of my images on postcards at the Quabbin Visitor Center, Kestrel, the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance, and some others to just hopefully use these to get people thinking about preservation. And this is really just the cute factor. This is just a 1-week-old baby loon. It's only the first week that they ride on their mother's back. Then this mother elk and her calf. So you can sort of see the emotion and connection. 2 great egrets building a nest together. And this was in our backyard, this mother turkey with 7 baby chicks. And I have a video of this that's really quite humorous. It can only actually cover 6 at a time, but there were 7 chicks. So the one on the end is always trying to nudge in underneath. And I just happened to kind of switch over to video from taking still images. And at that moment, the baby on the one side that was left out in the cold hopped up on the mother's back, jumped over to the other side, knocked the other one off the branch and down, and kind of took its place. And then the other one flew up, kind of flew back and tried, squeezing in. And it was a very, very funny exchange. Another Jack reference, just to show I did get this photo of the bald eagle feeding its chick. And then this was from this summer, 2 baby barred owls. And it's just been wonderful as people have learned that I do wildlife photography. I'll just get calls from people saying, I've got this whatever in my backyard. And so we were able to, people I'd never met before, went over to their house and we sat there for 4 hours. Well, 3 hours for them to actually emerge, but the one finally did. And that little one, it was really tough that's as far as it got. It just peeked out and disappeared. And then just some kind of unexpected, this was kayaking. We just rounded a bend in the river, and there's this blue heron standing there staring at us. So it looked like it wanted its picture taken, so I obliged. And then frogs staring, snowy egrets in their mating plumage, and black bear. This one was a little scary, but I got the shot and walked slowly away. And then this was a quail from out in Colorado this summer. So this is, well, actually a good example in terms of when you're taking photographs. If you have a big zoom lens, the one thing to understand is that you end up with a very shallow depth of field. And so shooting what they term as wide open, kind of f4 or on a large lens, you get this shallow depth of field, but what that does is does a nice job of blurring the background for you. So in this case, you have absolutely no detail in the background, so the bird really pops out. And I'll refer back to this a little later on in the talk. And then this is a gray fox that visited our backyard. And the bobcat, this was the first time we've ever had a bobcat in our yard in 40 years. So we're keeping a close eye on our chickens. Then this was out on Plum Island, a snowy owl that went there right to watched the sunrise and then sitting on the beach and saw this snowy owl perched up. And his eyes were closed almost the entire time, but then finally he opened them up to catch that glisten in the eyes, and I just loved the yellow color. And then osprey, these were kind of my gateway bird for photography. So helping to build the nest. And they had 3 chicks. You can see in this case the juveniles have orange eyes versus the yellow ones of the adults. But this took a while for them to cooperate and kind of get it all together and look in the same direction. And then at sunset, coming in with dinner. So one of the things, and for design projects or anything else, is really understanding the environmental context. And so in this case, instead of just a picture of a moose, showing the environment that that moose is residing in. So this is, again, Rocky Mountain National Park up at Sprague Lake, and really beautiful spot. And then there's the close-up of the moose. And then blue herons are one of my favorite birds to photograph, mostly because you see a fair number of them. This was the only spot that I could get the nest anywhere close to the moon. You can see if I had moved to the right, all would have been blocked by that vegetation, but it made a nice frame. So blue herons catching fish. So it's quite a process they go through in terms of catching and then kind of flipping them up and getting them positioned so that they can swallow them down. But they always have to put up with these pesky flies. So a little stare down going on. So this is that same Quabbin Tower, about the same spot where you saw the moon shot. And this was a day I went down to photograph at sunrise, but you can see all of the clouds kind of completely obscuring the sun. So I was going to just take a shot with the tower, and then you see the 2 loons in the mid, and the sun then just suddenly reflect off of the glass and create this kind of yellow brick road across the Quabbin. And another view of the Quabbin. So just very quickly, I promise to end shortly, but just thinking in terms of the future of photography. Right now we're in the age of computational photography with artificial intelligence. The top example, panoramas. I mean, I'm sure you've all gone out with your phone and just panned across, but you may not understand really what's happening, is that your camera is actually taking a whole bunch of individual images, and then with the little computer inside your phone, it's taking those photos and stitching them together to create this seamless panorama for you. So there's actually a lot of computing power going on to create that panorama for you. This picture of the cardinal, without autofocus eye detect, I don't know that I ever would have been able to get that shot, where the camera is actually computing and determining focus and zeroing in on the eye and getting that into focus. It's a very difficult task, getting something moving and trying to pan and hold the camera steady and focus at the same time. And then similar, it was talking about the focal length and getting that blurred background. Well, that's something you don't have to worry about anymore. I mean, with the iPhone and all the new phones coming out have this portrait mode that essentially imitates a wide open lens so that you can focus on your subject. It goes through processes, identifies what the subject is in the photograph, and then blurs the background. And you can decide on the slider how much blur you want. So you've got kind of adaptive focal length after the fact of taking the photo. So you're going to be able to do a lot of this post-processing in a very dynamic way. So this is kind of, so HDR, high dynamic range, is taking a series of photos at different exposures, and you combine those to create then a final composite, composite image, taking the best parts of the image and weaving them together. Focus stacking, which, I mean, again, some of the phones will allow you to do macro photography. It'll take a whole series of photos with the focus distance slightly changed and then merge those together to create a crystal sharp image. This is one that was taken with 5 separate images focusing on different areas. This is one that I just had to manually do and blend together, but so that you get everything in the photograph in very sharp focus. And then I don't know how many of you have played around with Photoshop's sky replacement tool, but if you go out on a crappy day and you've got a really just gray, dull sky, that you can go out and replace the sky with something a little bit more pleasing. So the key, though, is to not go too overboard. And then just some of the AI processing. This is actually my dad, but using Photoshop's neural filters where you can restore old photos and create a very clear, focused image, and then also convert it so that the black and white is now a color image. This is, again, out in Colorado during the elk rut, but that you can come in and create this foggy atmosphere and starbursts. I mean, you can do whatever and create, really add or, I would almost say, detract from your image. So things that are taking place, the new thing is these AI-generated photos with text prompts. Kind of began back in 2009 when they were teaching computers to recognize photographs. So they had this data set of 14 million images, all of them with human-encoded descriptions of the photos. And the idea was to let the computer generate captions for photos. So they could just dump photos in and it would automatically generate a caption, thinking about things for the deaf, for the blind, or no, not the deaf, the blind, so that it would be able to have that caption for them. Someone then had the brilliant idea, that, well, we've taught the computer how to recognize images and give us text. Why can't we give the computer text and let it create images for us? And so there's this website, this person does not exist, and it's just going into databases of human faces and compositing them to create, really fake IDs for Facebook and Instagram. But this is, I dare anybody to take a lineup of these and identify which one is fake and which one is real. So this is a couple of images that I generated using this one program called DALL-E 2. And just using a text description, a landscape photo of a lake, a brilliant deciduous forest and fall, mountains with a setting sun behind colorful clouds. And so 20 seconds, boom, it pops up 4 completely different images that kind of meet that criteria. Then you can go and play with all sorts of funky things. This is same description, but in the style of Monet. And then a landscape painting in the style of Van Gogh. So, I don't know, kind of similar. I think one of them cheated. And then this is another product called Stable Diffusion. So this was just a mountain lake at sunrise, trees in the foreground, grass in the foreground in the other image. And then this is a photo, this is mine. So, but I mean, the idea that once you start looking at these, it's really hard to tell what was real and what was generated by the computer. So this one is actually one that was generated by the computer. And there's some people artists that are really taking this on and have mastered the art of description to get pretty incredible results. So peeking around the corner, kind of, really the future here, you're in for a very exciting time. I think there's going to be a really dynamic relationship between photography and design in terms of being able to take 3D models and seamlessly integrate them into site photos, augmented reality, virtual reality, 360 photography. There's a huge number of trends that are coming along that are going to impact all of your futures as you become design professionals. And if you're expecting me to tell you what the future is, I haven't a clue. But I'm looking forward to seeing how all of you adapt to this changing landscape and create some wonderful products. So thank you.
So, I'd like to know what you feel, like, do you feel that our ability to represent or to visually or to capture what we see like in the world basically, do you feel like that's kind of like capped? And like it seems like with like technology like the sky replacement and the AI software that can like take information and create people that don't actually exist, it seems like when it comes to the visual aspect of things, there's this emphasis to sort of create something that doesn't actually exist and make it, like look more real, which definitely has its merits and stuff like that. It allows us to, see visual representations of concepts that we might create with our imaginations. But I'm wondering, like, in terms of like seeing, the human eye is as good as it gets. I mean,
Yeah.
for like we interpret reality, pretty clearly. So I'm wondering, do you think we can create any, like, can we improve on cameras or visual capture methods in a way that allows us to somehow see equivalent to the human eye, if not better? Not like change anything that's there, but like almost like, I'm not like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, or is that?
I'm trying to.
Just, there's the way I mean, obviously people have better vision. Some people have better vision than others and stuff like that, but by and large, can we make cameras any better at like capturing? Like at first we could only do black and white.
Right.
Now we created devices that can see color as we do.
And now we have 3D. We have 3D. I mean, you can digitize and create a 3D model from a series of photographs, so that you can actually create an immersive environment that you can take photos of a scene all around you and then actually walk into that scene with your VR goggles and see what it, walk around the place. But so the thought you were talking kind of initially when you said, things that aren't there yet. I mean, essentially, it's what designers do. You're conceptualizing in your mind. You're doing your best to try and see how that design is going to manifest itself and become a reality. And between CAD, 3D modeling, all these amazing tools now, it's going to be I mean, you can do it now, but it's going to be much simpler to meld those two together and bring kind of a digitized 3D site that you can walk into and plunk your design into that and then see what it is that you're about to create and take your client on a little tour and walk through the site. So yeah, there's some cool things coming.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah.
So there's a possibility of like real legitimate drunk goggles nowadays, right? We can put on
Right.
artificial reality and like actually make people look like the filters that we see on Instagram or Snapchat or something like that. And I'm wondering what you think will be the what are some potential effects of that on like the human psyche as time unfolds?
Wow. I mean, it's definitely having an effect, all of these technologies, in terms of people's attention span, ability to differentiate what's real, what's not real. And as you saw in these images, it's just going to get worse in terms of distorting things or creating fake news. So there's, I think some definite implications. I mean, it's out of the bag now. I mean, this is open source, free. People can adapt it in any way they desire. You can download these things or go on websites for free and type in to your heart's desire what, kinds of imagery you're looking to see. I mean, there's some that have filters, but some don't. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting place in the future. And there's no way of truly predicting what the implications for society are.
And if I could follow up, how do you see the cat and mouse race between sort of like image falsification and then image verification, and how like it seems like you can go and create these deep fakes, but then there's a way to go and tell if it's a deep fake.
Right.
It's which one is ahead of the other?
I mean, you had the perfect analogy there. I mean, it is a cat and mouse kind of game going on in terms of, obviously the people that are doing the fakes are doing their best to then understand how people are tracking fakes and then cover up those areas so that they can't track. And yeah, I mean, it's going to just keep going back and forth. But yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, Rebecca.
So we talked about the future, right? And then with rendering and stuff these days, there's been sort of this thread of wanting to include more like hand-drafted stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see sort of a parallel to that with like film photography? Do you see a place for film photography?
Oh, film is making a huge comeback right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people, that swear by film, or they just like the texture. The 8x10 cameras can capture better resolution than the highest resolution camera, well, except for the Webb telescope. I guess that's the champion still. But in terms of, really looking at, I don't know if you call it true or real photography, I mean, I think there'll always be a place for that. It's just, I grew up with a darkroom in my basement, and so, there's definitely, some fond memories of that, but I really don't miss the chemicals. So I'd rather sit in front of the computer working with Lightroom than trying to figure out when to stick the print in the stop bath. I know what time of year it is.
Well, I appreciate it. I was wondering if there's any characteristics compositionally that you think or that you try to include to make a picture, make an image more peaceful or more calming, to try to include, I guess, that emotion or feeling.
Great question. The short answer is I'm not really sure I do. It's sort of an intuitive feeling as you're looking through the lens, and I think that's kind of the human aspect of all of this. You think about Ansel Adams and some of the great photographers, and how they set a scene. Although my wife always argued that that was real photography and no change, just capturing what's there, and it's like bullshit. He did so much dodging and burning, and I mean the moonrise in Nebraska or wherever it was, the sky is black at sunset. Yeah, come on. So, but anyway, you can add contrast, and that's where, it's really an art form, or you're creating art. So, I have no qualms with that at all. But I'm sorry, the other part of your question.
I guess that covers it. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I was just wondering. Yeah, I guess like some people say like horizontal lines.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. Well, so kind of that whole idea of leading lines, and S-curves are very calming and relaxing and kind of soothing versus harsh lines that are converging or creating a lot of dynamic tension. So yeah, it's thinking about those kinds of things. One of the trends I didn't talk about was autonomous photography. And so they're developing cameras now that will the AI will advise you on what's the best composition. And so a little to the right, up, and I have no idea how that's going to really come over or how useful it will be. I think, maybe for novice photographers, but certainly that's not the way to create art.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Robert.
Great presentation, very provided. My question is more like a professional ethics question. So one is photography for art's sake, and the other is photography for communication's sake, for design projects. So if you're photographing a design project of a firm, how much latitude do you think the photographer should have to Photoshop it up compared to what the place really is in that instance? When it's
Right.
about promoting the firm, like that's the goal.
Yeah. Well, you saw my first image, and I really saw that as just simply street sweeping. I mean, if I'd come there with a broom and a power washer, yeah, it would have looked like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any notion of going in and, that really isn't great design. I'm going to just move this over here. And yeah, so I think that's a pretty clear ethics violation of doing a little too much creative editing and not really following the intent of the designer. But you know, it is a challenge going out to a site and just trying to find out what is the best image that truly captures what the designer was trying to do. And actually for all of you, as you're looking at your own designs, I think a really useful exercise is to just put yourself in the photographer's shoes and think about your design and, okay, so where would I go to photograph this site? Where's the best viewpoint? You know, if the guy comes to me and says, what do you want to photograph? Where are you going to tell them to stand and look and capture that scene? And so I think it's a good way to just self-evaluate what you've done with your design and have you done anything worth photographing? Yeah, Michael.
Amazing pictures, photographs. Like Andrew, I felt after a long day working, it was such a privilege to be uplifted, with this presentation. So gorgeous. And I was especially, I don't have any questions about technology, but I love the idea that you use technology to show nature, And I felt too, watching this, that I'm going through life with my eyes closed. I haven't seen like 99% of the things you show. I've never seen before. So it just was breathtaking. So really appreciate it.
It's called retirement.
What's that?
I said it's called retirement.
I don't think I have enough time. That's amazing.
It opens up new opportunities. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Scott.
Great work. Nice talk. Thank you.